Hello and welcome to a Star Citizen State of the Game for Alpha 3.5 Alive. 3.5 was in its PTU, its test phase, for a couple of weeks longer, delaying that live release. And that live release did have some issues when it went live, and they have since been hotfixed. This is the state of the game for the latest 3.5 live build as of the 24th of April 2019. It's based on my experiences in the Star Citizen Persistent Universe. I think it said live and release a lot in that intro. The new flight model, let's start with that. So there's some drastic changes with the flight model, but the flight model is unfinished at this stage. It needs a lot of work. The core of it is solid though. It's a lightweight model, so it's less resource intensive on clients and the server. It is simple with its velocity control and decoupling, sort of like being where the skill ceilings open up for good pilots to be able to get really good. Basically, you now have thrust applied in the direction you're pressing, so forward, back, left, right, up, down, and your ship will come to a halt if you don't give it any inputs. Velocity control allows you to specify how much you want your maximum velocity to be, and then you can turn on cruise control and stay at that speed that you've set it. You can also toggle to coupled mode to keep the velocity in the direction that you were traveling in, and then you can turn without losing velocity in that direction, and you can do some impressive combat maneuvers by sort of like turning decoupled on and off, and then going after a ship from behind and using it to aid your turning circle and sort of like keep tracking on targets with that. So atmospheric flight has some more weight to it now, is the way I describe it. The heat mechanics mixed with the additional factors of lift and requiring more thrust to keep you afloat make atmospheric flight and combat more dangerous, or at least feel that way, and feel better for me. However, some ships are pretty unfun to fly in atmosphere at the moment. The Terrapin, for example. Yes, it's a brick, but it should be better than it is. It's terrible. But this is more due to the VTOL systems not being properly in yet. It's planned for 3.6 with the hover mechanics. This should give the feel of atmospheric flight and the use of ships with VTOL a much better sort of like implementation than they currently have. Moreover, to that, a load of ships need balancing for space and atmospheric flight. The new flight model has a lot of promise, and it does need to deliver on that. It's just unfinished at the moment. It needs the rest of the mechanics for VTOL and hover. It needs physicalized components that are being worked on at the moment. All those components driving a ship working together. Then it needs balancing for each of the ship's hulls. And all of those components obviously need balancing as well. There's a lot to do, and not all those systems are in yet. So the heat mechanic has your thrusters, items, and weapons overheating, mainly if they're being strained. So if you're using afterburner a lot, or you're in atmosphere, or you're firing certain weapons for long periods of time. That's sort of like the only real times I felt these overheating mechanics since the live build. In the PTU, however, it was evil. Everything constantly overheated. It's a lot better than it was now. Still needs some work. Ship combat. So that's changed a lot as well. It's much slower in general. Obviously, the flight model has changed. Shields have a lot more health. Turning with ships is slower. They have much bigger turning circles. Trying to sort of stick on the tails of ships as much as you can, rather than typically jousting, although jousting does still happen in fact with some ships at the moment. It's the preferred way to engage. Ship AI is much better than it was in 3.4, because it was broken in 3.4, and it's still got a long way to go now, and it does break occasionally. They need to dial it in more for the new flight model at the moment. There's lots more behaviors and tactics that they need to get it sort of like in and stable for the persistent universe. The PTU phase of 3.5 was plagued with rubber banding or non-responsive ship AI. In fact, that was one of the main reasons its live build was delayed. However, AI will now fight you, spawn appropriately for missions, though they don't provide much of a challenge for you unless they ram you or there's lots of them. They are at least better than they were. That said, I fly mostly combat fighters or the Cutlass, which doesn't seem to have much problem with the smaller fighters anyway. But this does range to larger ships now, and you will be fighting big ships, constellations, hammerheads, things like that. Auto gimbals are an interesting addition to the game. You can cycle manual, fixed, or assisted gimbal mode, and assisted gimbals, auto gimbals. So they have a soft auto aim, those auto gimbals, which sort of like locks onto a target if you're aiming close enough to the pip of that target. It doesn't instantly enable you to hit with every shot though, and it has a limited angular range compared to manual gimbals. In the PTU, these were mega overpowered, but they've been toned down somewhat now. However, just like the flight model, it does require more balance. And there's a problem at the moment with ship combat in general, which is sort of like weapon pips and shots will just start not converging. They'll start missing targets. Obviously, that's a major problem that they are fixing at the moment. Weapons also are supposed to now converge and normalize to your slowest weapon so that you're only firing at a single pip in whatever mode. So you can pick any weapons you want and not have to worry about where you're aiming them because they all converge to a single pip. The combination of the new flight model, converging weapons, and auto gimbals seems to me at least to be a conversation about skill floors and skill ceilings. So auto gimbals and the basics of flight in the new flight model allow even new players that might not want to get good at combat to at least be competent in combat and in the game to a reasonable level. That's a skill floor. Fixed weapons, manual gimbals, loadout choice, and getting good with the flight model allow for a high skill ceiling and room to grow in those areas. The new planet ArcCorp and Area 18 are actually pretty amazing. ArcCorp does not look as good as it does from a distance. When it was in the 2017 CitizenCon, that appears to have been a texture or semi-faked level of detail that they used there, something static. We should be getting a better looking planet at that sort of like range, long distance levels of detail stuff as we go forward though. Closer to the surface though, those assets, buildings, districts, and areas, they do come more to life. And you're able to get very close to the surface of that planet, land on some of the buildings, though there isn't much there to do beyond Area 18. Also, there's now a new autopilot sort of feature that takes over your ship. If you get too close to the ground, it pulls you up, is the idea. It doesn't always work. Sometimes it just makes you ram the ground because that's what it thinks you were trying to do. Or maybe it's just trying to save the populace by ramming you into them. But Area 18 is the main focus of ArcCorp, really. Obviously, the general fact that they can do a procedurally generated city planet is great. But Area 18, that's where you can do things. So there's a spaceport there, and when you go to the spaceport, you then have to take a bus to the main area of the city, and this bus darts in and out of buildings. It feels really alive. There's traffic on the roads, although they are just very low detail assets and textures at the moment, all sort of like faked or very lightweight. Around Area 18, there's a lot to see though. Shops, NPCs walking around, social areas, and lots of room for missions and social content in the future. A lot of these buildings are very searchable. There's Center Mass, which has pretty much all the weapons in the game at the moment and items and things like that you can get there. There's the Jobwell, the TDD there. There's ability to get commodities around. There's quite big hab rooms in Adria Falls. Little habs there. So there's quite a lot going on, and just the general sort of like ambience of the area, the holograms they've got around really do give you sort of Altered Carbon, Cyberpunk, Blade Runner vibes, and just it's fantastic. Area 18 and ArcCorp are a massive technical achievement as well. That's not to be sort of like ignored. This is a giant step in the right direction and a huge part of the building blocks for Star Citizen of the future. There are 2 new moons as well, Lyria and Walla. They have some new color palettes and assets, cool smoky cryo geysers that sort of like help build out the gameplay area further. Just some cool little new assets there, but they are basically moons. They're effectively a single biome each. These are more to allow players to get more gameplay around ArcCorp without having to travel beyond the sort of ArcCorp area. You don't want to have to be traveling huge distances to get your gameplay. And with that in mind, quantum travel times, they're still very long. So for small ships, around 15 to 20 minutes from one side of a system to another. This is reduced to around 5 minutes or so if you're on a large ship, so like the big ships. You are able to stay near a single planet and its moons though now, with a huge amount of missions available and content there, not just mission-based content, but other content as well, without having to move to another planet if you so choose. The travel times make sense for the game once we have more carriers, once we have more content, dynamic events. But at the moment, it's a little boring if you only have a small ship and you want to travel around. And you want to travel around at least once. You want to have a look at everything in Star Citizen 3.5. That said, you can buy ships. You can buy some of the medium-sized ships at least viably. I mean, you can buy the big ones, but 21 million VEC is going to take you a while. They are still super expensive, but obtainable. Ship rentals in the Persistent Universe is coming in 3.6 though. I think that's what a lot of people are waiting for, so that's the next major update. Atmospheric travel times. Surface to space and vice versa are much quicker though. That is fantastic in 3.5. You can use quantum travel much closer to the surface of a planet and to get much closer to wherever you're trying to get to, and without having to be in an atmosphere for 10 plus minutes. Get out of the atmosphere in 10 plus minutes, should I say. Hubs in each of the major landing zones have persistence as well now, so you can move and store items in your room, then log back in, and those changes have been saved, though your hub can move around its contents already saved. And what I mean by that is that you might be on floor 3, room 2 in ArcCorp's hubs, but once you log back in, it might have moved you to floor 2, room 1, but it would still be the same room, just a different physical address, if you see what I mean. There have been lots of improvements to lighting, planets, moons, procedural generation, tweaks, and optimization that have many areas looking and performing a good bit better than previously. Though I am unable to test a range of hardware for Star Citizen, you can check out the updated telemetry page with 3.5 and new info on it to see how systems are performing in game now. Mission-wise, there's a lot of fun you can have now with a wide variety of missions that mostly seem to work. There's bounties, investigations, deliveries, escorts and rescues for the service beacon stuff, taking out bunkers, competing with players to get items. Most of the missions work pretty well now. There's loads more as well. Save the occasional cargo box falling through the floor, and occasionally there is missions that just become unresponsive, but it's a lot less than it used to be. The Twitch Pacheco mission, which is the new mission giver mission, and its counter mission being a fantastic example of what we might get dynamically in the future. It has you, from the Twitch Pacheco side, get given a cutlass, which doesn't matter if you have a cutlass or not. She literally gives you one. You have to go and pick it up. Then you go to a stash house, clear out the turrets and NPCs there, search for a specific package in a complex full of other packages, and then bring that back to ArcCorp. The counter mission has after a certain amount of time, a player going to the same stash house and getting paid based on the amount of boxes they destroy. So this can have you go up against NPCs there, or a player, or players, based on how far they got with the mission. There are updates to other missions too, and a lot of them ramp up in reward and difficulty the more of them you do. This can have you fighting much larger range of ships, including hammerheads eventually. This also extends to the crime stat system now as well. So players with a crime stat of 2 or more are hunted by security from Hurston Crusader, ArcCorp, Advocacy, Navy. The higher the crime stat, the more dangerous the ships will be hunting you. It's not everywhere, but it's in certain areas. They can interdict you. Pirates can interdict you as well. Player bounty missions will also be generated for crime stat 2 or higher players, though players that want to do bounties against players need to do an NPC bounty first and then do the intro, I think it's North Rock bounty mission to get access to those player bounties. In fact, there are a lot of missions geared towards outlaws now too, so there are more reasons to be an outlaw in 3.5 than previous. Destroying cargo ships does make them spawn some of their loot as cargo. You can scan ships as well to see if they've got cargo on them, just as you would ping things with the scanner. There is a huge amount missing, though, with risk and reward and in all areas of the game. Once we have commodities, sort of like cargo that we can move by hand, that will give pirates a lot more gameplay because they'll be robbing ships more than just trying to destroy them. We do need more physicalized components. There's loads of stuff we need in Star Citizen at the moment. There is still no multiplayer mission sharing. You can bodge paying crew with the service beacon system, but the lack of focused multi-crew group missions and mission sharing and reasons to party with the gameplay system to support them at the moment is a real shame. There is a big change with what we saw with 3.4's Jump Town gameplay loop in 3.5. And this would have players going to Jump Town regularly, grabbing a load of Widow, and then selling it at a couple of different stations, Levski and sort of like Rimhex, I believe it was. There are drug labs like Jump Town now across various moons in game. Quite a few of them, and you can purchase different drugs from Widow to Slam to Neon to Stims to Ultratoxin. Once you have worked out where to sell them, which is a whole other ballgame because I don't know where to sell some of them still, the markup on them is poor compared to what 3.4 was. And it might be better just for people that are interested in grinding money to just do missions or do general cargo hauling, which can just be quicker and more profitable now, especially when the trade routes are much easier to perform between just major landing zones. And getting those drugs effectively has you having to go to very small areas that make you a lot more vulnerable. A major problem I still have with commodities is the fact that you have to deal with them in tiny batches as well. If I have a caterpillar, I want to be able to deal with all of my cargo in one go, or at least quicker than 800 units at a time. This should be dealt with when we have cargo loading and unloading timers in 3.9 though, but that is first quarter of 2020. It's quite far away. It's just a shame that there isn't just sort of like, your ship is now unavailable for 8 minutes while we unload your ship once you're trying to do a sale or whatever, but we'll have to wait and see how that is finally implemented in 3.9. It's just a general complaint. There was something great about the jump town dynamic though in 3.4. Dividing that up to multiple locations with much smaller rewards just seems a bit of a shame to me. I want that conflict and big risk reward to be there. Hopefully with the law system and black market updates in 3.6, we can get big rewards for smuggling, but also risk a lot. I think for people that want to be outlaws, I think that's the thing. You want outlaw gameplay and lawful gameplay to sort of like collide, generate missions and fun for each other, not to be seen as griefing, and for that risk and reward to be there, make it reasonable so that you sort of like know what a player might want to do. They might not just want to murder everything if there's money to be made. There are mining improvements as well for the prospector. And sort of like how things spawn. It still needs more refinement though. There's lots of tweaks to it. It's still only performed with the prospector at the moment, but it's essentially still the same. These mechanics suffer mostly from other parts of the game by those parts not being ready. We need a more dynamic economy, storage, cargo version 2, full persistence. It's an example of one of the more full non-combat gameplay loops that sort of works. That said, there are players that had loads and loads and loads of problems crashing constantly and mining in the PTU. I believe that's reasonably well working now. I had a little play with mining earlier. I didn't have any issues with it. It does not to say that it is 100% truly fixed or anything. That's just my experience with it. Being able to customize your character to a much larger degree and have female characters allows a lot more players to express themselves in the way that they wanted. It's a pretty bare-bones system at the moment though, but you can blend predefined heads and features together to make yourself unique looking, and then change your skin, hair, eye type and color to make a unique character for yourself, basically. It's getting a load of work and additional features for the future, more heads and functionality and a better UI though, but it's good in the short term. Items and components now wear at a very slow wait, which a lot of players just won't notice, I suppose, before they claim their ship. Actually, something that's worth noting as well, repairing and refueling on pads can actually take a little while to complete, and rearming as well, obviously. And it doesn't really tell you or inform you when it's done, so just be aware of that. Once you've started it, it can take a little while before your ship is sort of like repaired. I sort of like leave my ship there while I'm going to do other things. Some of the issues I faced in the most recent 3.5 build is boxes still fall through some ships, planets, and some floors, though this is much less likely to happen than it used to, admittedly, but placing boxes and items down seems to be reasonably reliable in cargo areas and hubs. However, the 300 and Reliant seem to still have problems with boxes. I'm sure some of the other ships do as well. The problem is much more apparent when you're dropping something rather than placing it. If it literally drops out of your hands, it's much more likely just to sink through the floor and off and away. Some Area 18 hubs as well lack air, causing you to suffocate without a helmet. So if you do log off without a helmet and then log back on, it can be annoying because you're just suffocating in your bed before you can get up. You have to rapidly tap F1 and try and put a space suit on. Weapon projectiles and traces occasionally diverge significantly from players' point of aim, which is something that really affects auto gimbals and ship combat and that sort of stuff. It just makes it feel broken occasionally. There is a major issue with spawning ships at ArcCorp and Lawville at the moment that can leave you trapped at the landing zones unless you're lucky. You have to keep on spawning your ship and eventually you can sometimes get out. This is a known issue and should be fixed ASAP, as are pretty much everything else we've discussed, to be honest. FPS AI need work. They will shoot you and engage you now, but they're no real threat, and they're terrible at pathfinding and seem to clip through a lot of things, and they stutter oddly when they die. You can pick up their weapons. There's some cool stuff you can do with them, but at the moment, obviously not appropriate for anything that would be seen as polished. There are updates planned to them as well for 3.6. That should see them in a much better state. There are lots of minor or outlying issues too. Ladders are still hell Bed logging in ships works inconsistently. Armistice zones still have players ramming each other. This requires a system, really, to prevent repeat offenders from doing this. Full persistence and sort of proper crime and punishment and reputation that persists. That would really help, I suspect. I personally hate controls changes as well to the default controls, which 3.6 has done en masse. That said, setting up your controls and getting the game how you want it is something that I do now with every major patch, because there are sometimes big components and sort of like mechanical changes. There is a lot coming together with Alpha 3.5. Big new changes, but its persistent universe suffers from what some will see as grindy, repetitive tasks, because after you've done them a few times, they do become a lot more grindy, and they are repetitive. Missions need variance, more variance, and to make use of all these modular pieces that they've been working on for quite a while now. The new additions, flight model, etc. need more work. We need larger servers as well. We're currently capped at 50 players per instance, and with such a huge gameplay zone and area, it's just... you can not see anyone for a huge period of time unless you're at a major landing zone. And we almost certainly won't get a larger gameplay area or more people in game until they finish the server-side object container streaming. At least finish that anyway. Mission sharing and more reasons to group up would be most welcome as well. I want to get really involved with multi-crew. And multi-crew is in a good state. It's just there's no real reason to multi-crew unless you're doing something planned, unless you're fighting a large ship. And yeah, you can go off and cause a ruckus in a hammerhead, and then eventually a sort of like navy hammerhead will turn up if you've been a naughty boy and fight you, which is actually pretty cool. So there is some cool stuff going on there. If you are in an org or with a group, you can have endless fun in 3.5 is basically what I'm saying. So if you're looking to play Star Citizen more than just to see what's new and as a quick tourist destination, looking at how pretty stuff is, then I'd suggest that you get into an org. Some orgs make use of the giant sandbox that Star Citizen is and run these big events and cool little gameplay, self-made missions, things that they've made themselves, and they can be amazingly good fun. Even though missions are much better in 3.5, the game still does lack from much needed gameplay loops and deeper persistence. Although the core of the game continues to move forward and get better, it's sort of like one of the double-edged swords of Cloud Imperium focusing on getting Squadron 42 Episode 1 complete. That focus on the core gameplay may well be the most sensible thing for the persistent universe in the long term as well. However, the lack of gameplay loops and the sort of like bugs snap you back into remembering that the game is very much still in alpha. If you're looking for a game to play that's fleshed out or has hundreds of hours of content, or you've heard what Star Citizen's persistent universe is going to be in the future, and you're looking forward to that, then Star Citizen is not yet right for you. There is no long-term progression yet. Core gameplay mechanics are still being implemented. Most of the gameplay loops aren't there. The game is much more of a bug hunt, providing feedback on mechanics. It's the testing process, and if you're interested in that, then Star Citizen is much more appropriate. However, if you're in a group, if you want to be making Star Citizen content yourself, if you want to be making your own little role-play missions and cool stuff in a big group, sort of like all together, then again, Star Citizen can be amazingly good fun. If you are, however, the former, if you're looking for a fleshed out game, maybe take a look at Star Citizen Alpha 3.9, first quarter of 2020. That's where it looks like that the game might be a bit more mainstream. Its core mechanics being in a much better state. Dynamic missions are going to be there. Salvage a bit more refined as a gameplay mechanic and actually there. Potentially we'll see server-side object container streaming, larger servers, full persistence. Obviously this might change, but it's worth checking out around then is what I'm saying if you want a more fleshed out game. Whatever your thoughts on Star Citizen Alpha 3.5, it's a big step in the right direction. Cloud Imperium continues to aim for a major release once every 3 months, with 3.6 aimed at the end of June and adding a lot more gameplay as well. But what do you think? Is Star Citizen something you check on every so often to see where it is? Do you play each major patch until you're burnt out? Or are you in an org and play all the time and have great fun with Star Citizen? What do you think of the additions in 3.5? Whatever your thoughts, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Every month we have a giveaway for a Star Citizen ship. For April 2019, we are giving away a Drake Corsair with lifetime insurance. It's the new concept ship focused on exploration, and the loaner for that ship is currently the Constellation Aquila and the Buccaneer. To be in for a chance of winning, be subscribed to my channel and comment on any video that I put out during April. Full details in the description below. Need a PC or upgrade to play Star Citizen? Consider Shadow. Shadow is a cloud-based subscription alternative to a gaming PC, and it works with Star Citizen Alpha 3.5 better than it ever has. It leverages the power of the internet to give you a Windows 10 gaming environment, potentially anywhere. Check out the links below or go to shadow.tech for more information. Use the code BoredGamer to receive a discount on your subscription if you do decide to try it. I'm not sponsored or paid by Cloud Imperium in any way. This is a Star Citizen news and fan channel that is supported by you, the community. Patrons, donations, subscriber stars, YouTube members, that little join button underneath my videos, all help support the channel and allow me to create regular video content, maintain a website, upload podcasts, and more. If you wish to go that extra mile, it is amazingly helpful. There is occasional exclusive content for those that do as well.